stand, 343 springs of living water. I thirsted in the bare land of sin and shame, and nothing satisfying there I found. But to the blessed cross of Christ one day I came, where springs of living water did abound. Drinking at the springs of living water, and knowing that my mind was simply satisfied. Drinking at the springs of living water,
bless us with more rain, and it's good to have each one. I hope you've had a good afternoon, and I don't know how much rain you've been getting. We didn't get much, but anyway, it is good to see you. Hope you've had a great afternoon. Let's ask the Lord's blessings here on a service. Cecil, you willing to lead our service in prayer for us, please?
Heavenly Father, we thank you and praise you for another day. Lord, for your many blessings. We ask that you would be honored here tonight. Lord, meet the need of each one that's come this way. Lord, be with our online ministry and touch those hearts and lives. And just pray that you be honored and glorified. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. You go ahead and be seated.
Amen. Number 348, redeemed.
Redeemed of our love to proclaim, and redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. Redeemed by his infinite mercy, this time and forever I am. Redeemed, 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 redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. Redeemed, this time and forever I am.
I'll be presenting here just a little bit the ministry that we had at Red Cliff, but I do want to mention just a couple of very quick announcements. Looking into September, man, is it not hard to believe we're already there? 3 more months and the year's done. And so anyway, kind of crazy, but a couple of things I do want to mention. September the 2nd will be the next prayer opportunity, and so if you're able to join us for that, 9:30 in the morning, would encourage you to do that. Then on Labor Day weekend, we'll be having a fellowship following the evening service, and it'll be a great time to be able to invite someone and spend that time just in fellowship. We will not be doing a Labor Day picnic here on the property as well. And then as we get into the middle of September, 14th and 15th, we'll have the Wednesday meal. Then the ladies will have the Bible study on the 15th. The emergency services dinner has been set for October the 7th, and if you would make that a matter of prayer, that will be a lot of work going into that, but look forward to that. Also, just want to mention, just by way of prayer, we've got the units hung. Outside units still need to be installed, but we've got to get the electrical run. And we've run into a few challenges on that. If you would just pray about that. We need to run it out of that building over there just from a power standpoint. But wire is a lot more expensive than I would like for wire to be. And so just pray that we're able to discern all of that. We'll give you more details when I know more details. But just make that a matter of prayer that we're able to get everything finalized and get all of this come together. And then part of that is going to run into the infamous shortage issue, supply chain shortage, if you've heard those words. If you've tried to order anything, that's pretty much everything that's going on. So we'll see, but it may take a couple of weeks once we determine the best route to go on that. But I just really would appreciate your prayer for wisdom and direction on that. We're able to get all of that finalized. It is going to be an additional expense to us. We knew that, and so we'll see what those numbers end up being total once we get a better idea of where we are.
Brother, I know you spent a week in another time zone, but we didn't lose a month.
Yeah, we did.
There's 4 months left,
No,
not 3.
well, it's the last third.
September, October, November, and I just had to give you a hard time, brother. Number 317, what a friend we have in Jesus.
I do want to just take some time here and go through the opportunity that we had to go to Pinedale. Kelly Greenwood and I, along with 4 other guys, were able to go. One was out of a church in Michigan, and he was a tremendous blessing to be able to have his knowledge. The others were guys that we had gone with on a number of occasions. Probably one of the most common questions that I'm asked is, where is Pinedale? Well, this may give you a little bit of an idea. If you have any geographical sense, go to the map, Jared. And basically, we are about 100, just under 100 miles south of Yellowstone. So it is actually a very beautiful area. We are able to see quite a bit. So we'll fly into Salt Lake City, and then we drive for typically about 4 to 5 hours by the time we're actually able to get there, depending on how far we push. It's crazy because there will be a lot of people who come from Idaho. And it's like, oh my goodness, why are they coming all the way from Idaho? It's really not that far. Less than 90 miles, we can be in Jackson, Wyoming, which is right at the base of Yellowstone. You've probably heard Jackson Hole. And so we can actually see the mountains from the camp, but it is a beautiful location, no doubt. Well, go on to the next slide, and what you'll find is 2017, the lodge had a massive fire, and many of you have heard this, some of you have not. It was in the winter of 2017, at that time, they'd had for that winter 23 feet of snow. It's at elevation is 8,600 feet right at the camp. And when this actually burned was 10 feet of packed snow. So that's what you were walking on, was 10 feet of snow. They had been up, I believe it was on a Monday, and everything was fine. Someone had forgotten something, and they came up on Monday. Later, they came back up on Wednesday, and when they came back up, that was the site they had seen, and everything essentially burned right down into the big snow pile. And thankfully, that's what happened, because if that had not happened, it would have just completely destroyed everything. So it was an extremely hot fire. Dean Loftus is the director, and he explained a number of things that were melted, and just really a phenomenal fire. But nonetheless, they have been working on rebuilding. Go to the next slide, and that is currently where it is. That was what we saw when we were there. And Kelly and I have been on every floor of that project at some point in time. And so we are now, it's a 15,000 square foot building, and it is quite massive. And so we're thankful for the work that has been able to be done. There's really not a ton that has been done on the outside from where we were last time. They do have the railing going across the front. Most of the work that they had done was inside. Now, if you look, this is the vantage point from that railing. That is out the view, and it is absolutely gorgeous. And so we are able to enjoy that quite a bit. One of these days, we're going to go and just intentionally sit on that deck and not work. And I am looking forward to that time. I did sit on it for just a little while, but we did not stick around too long. Go to the next one, please. And these are the 6 guys. The individual on the front left would be Chuck Clute. He is the president currently of IBBI, just does a great job organizing these trips. The guy in the middle on the front is Mike Carpenter. He was out of Michigan. And then John, and you see myself and Kelly. John, and then the one in the back, David Troster, they were both out of Berean as well, out of Atlanta, Georgia. And it's just been a great ministry. Thomas Schaefer began it, about 15 years ago, I think it was. And so it's been a great ministry, done a number of projects. They had actually just got back from the Dominican Republic not too long before this trip. And so these were the 6 of us. Go to the next one. And this was where we started. This is on the back side of the building, and it was one of those deals where it's like we walked up and it's like, hey, that looks exactly like we left it, and basically it did. The only difference was that they added, you see the 3 boxes there in the middle, those are hoods that are coming out of the kitchen. So last year we had built the roof that those are sitting on, and their kitchen is up underneath that. All of those are the hoods for the various pieces of equipment. We had done the framing up to that point last year, but then we ran out of materials, and so we were unable to continue that framing. And you'll see some of the beams that are just kind of, so you've got the poles that are going up and down on the very left. You've got one beam. Second pole, you've got one on the right. Then you got one on the left. We ended up having 2 beams in each place. There's not a lot of pictures of those because the people who were taking pictures were actually doing the lifting of the beams. So it wasn't a whole lot of work there. But this is what we saw when we got there. The next one will take us to the end of that, and basically continuing on to the edge of this building. And so that's where we started this time. Basically, that is also where we left off. So go to the next one, and we began. I guess this is an upper view of how far some of the decking had come. And this is going, I don't know really what the distance was. I think he says about 160 feet long for the building. I would guess we're probably doing about 120 feet of decking or so, 5 1/4 inches at a time. Takes a long time to go that far. So it's going to be like, wow, you didn't make much progress. Yeah, all right. Anyway, next picture. This is where the roof shot, and this is what these guys had to start with. So each of these 3 boxes to the left are where the hoods are coming up out of the kitchen. This ends up being a metal roof that's going to go underneath that, but to try to get some of the water to divert away from that, even though it's covered, the guys end up having to build it's called a cricket, but basically it's just a little angled piece that's going to go up and funnel that water on away. And so it took a lot of time. You can go to the next one. And each morning we were able to start off the word of prayer and get the instructions from the boss man. The man that is in the left in the middle there, his wife helped cook for about the first half of the time, and so I had a great opportunity to get to know them as well. Go to the next one. And this is these guys starting on some of the metal, and they worked on that for a couple of days and while we were trying to do some of the framing, but each one of those boxes is going to have one of those going around it. Go to the next one. And this is getting some of the beams installed. I put this one up here because John is the individual in the orange shirt there. He had to drill, there's about, each beam has 2 bolts going through it. It's about 21 inches long for the bolts. And so he was the man that drilled through each of those. We would get them up and temporarily hold them. And then he would come back later on and drill through those. We would end up placing the beams up against a ladder. Kelly would pull them up. I would have help initially in the bottom getting it up, and then I would walk up the ladder as he was pulling it. And that's how we set each of those beams. And so it was a fun time, just a wonderful adventure, and one of those times where I'm praying, Kelly, don't let go. And nonetheless, it was an exciting time. These were, 10 feet long, I think, roughly. The front ones, we could not lift that way. The front ones were 15 to 18 feet long, and we still wrestled them, but we were using more machines on that one. It was just... those were a whole lot worse than these. These were a lot easier. The one that's to the left, if you look initially when I first showed you a picture, there was just kind of a support. There was actually no beam there. That was one that we were not able to install because it was not there. That one was about 20 feet long. And so the stairs are actually going to be going up right in that section. So there was a lot of kind of redesigning on all of that, but we were able to get that first beam up early in the morning. We did use a machine for that one, and we were able to get that in. Go to the next one, and we've got several things. This will give you an idea. Kelly is not just standing there looking like he's doing nothing, even though it does look like he is. But he is. We're looking for the beam to be able to come up, and we had to have some of these joists and so forth handed to us. Go to the next one, and this is Kelly working now, so I did include that. He and I did a lot together. He's got a Band-Aid on his chin. You want to go ahead and admit what happened? Or he, yeah, that it was a whole lot more what happened. So anyway, but we had framed in each of these. So we would put in, I think we put in 7 beams or so, 7 or 8 beams, and then each of the joists in between those. We were doing that while the guys were working on the metal, just trying to, because we couldn't cover this until they had completed what they were doing. So we were. There's a tremendous amount of framing really that goes into all of these things that you don't really see. Each of the posts, and there ends up being a lot of those that are set out through there. Because of these hoods, they had to keep the walkway, the decking at least 2 feet away from everything. So at each one of these places, we had to put the posts up for a railing to be able to go around it. And so it was quite a bit. Go to the next one. And this was our install of the last beam. I'm not sure, there were no pictures of us pushing and heaving and hoeing and all of that, but they did get pictures, the one beam where 2 guys are walking up or holding this thing on a lift. I'm actually on the ladder, Kelly's on the other end, and that was the final one that ended up being installed. Go to the next one, and Kelly is there putting the bolts in between each one. So these are probably about 6 to 8 inch bolts, and we would have to drill through each of those holes. The beams themselves, 3 inches thick approximately, about 18 inches wide, and so then you'd run about 10 feet long. And so they were a pretty good chunk of wood. Go to the next one, and this would give you an idea. Everything, for the most part, is framed out here. We still ended up doing some more posts a little bit further on down. You see towards the end, that is the longer beam that I was telling you about where the stairway is going to come up. But each of these posts were in. Basically, by this point in time, the framing was, for the most part, done, and we were able to start the decking. Go to the next one. And this would be some of the decking where it had been started. Gives you an idea of how far still it's got to go. Now, we had already framed in, so this gives you an idea of the length. Previous picture already, showed some of those framed in. Go to the next one, and it gives you a little bit of an idea. Each one of these, it's a custom cut logs. There was nothing, there's no measuring, there's none of that. We would eyeball it and just gradually cut on around this thing and just keep cutting and cutting and cutting and cutting, and eventually you'd get it. There is no log that's the same. None of them are perfectly round. There's no such thing as forming a pattern to be able to do this, and so we just kept sawing away, and eventually we would get them in, but we did that on every single pole and every single post, and so it was an entertaining job, to say the least. Go to the next one, and this gives you an idea. We had started down some of the 4-foot sections. It's just gradually starting to fill in. Go to the next one, and once again, we just continued basically advancing on down. Go ahead and go to the next one. This is John. This is towards the last day that we were working, and he was helping us put up a post, and so we went ahead and snatched his picture. The next one, this is to prove, oh no, Kelly and I still weren't working there, just teasing. Go to the next one where we are somewhat working. We are so close to the end. We had prayed that we would be able to get that very last section on the left was the last section. And I would say we were about an hour and a half away from being able to complete this stupid deck. We have been 3 years up there and not completed a deck yet. Well, we didn't this time either. We thought we were good Thursday night when it all ended. I think we would have been able to, I know we would have been able to have finished it. And Friday morning, we had a curveball thrown to us with the posts that needed to go for the stairway, and that was a little bit of a complicated process. I know it doesn't seem like much, but you may see the 2 little bolts right there at the end of the decking that is laid. That's where one of the steel saddles is going through. Well, that happens to be where a post was going. So we had to have guys notch the post, and then drill all the way through a 1/4-inch steel 3 times. To be able to get the screws in there to be able to hold the post up. It was just a complicated thing. So we got, I would say, probably an hour, maybe an hour and a half. If we had had that, we'd have been able to finish it, but we just didn't quite have that. Go to the next one. This gives you an idea. You see the little metal pieces that I was talking about. That would give you an idea. That's just to try to help the water. If there is water, it wouldn't be a lot because there's a roof up above it. That would help the water come in and go down. Go to the next one. And it gives you an idea. This is actually from the end right where we had finished, to the point where we had finished looking back. We were in the final stages at this point of clearing things up and blowing off what we had done, and we were getting ready to pack it up for the rest of the time. The next one, this would be the finished one. So close, yet so far. And so seems like the story of our lives, a day late and a dollar short. But that very last section, probably 20 pieces or so, I think, would fill that cavity, and but another group will be able to come and do that. Next one gives you, this was what we came to, where we started. Go to the next one, and that's where basically that same section that we had finished. Then go to the next one, and that was again where we had started. You see where we did not have that 20-foot beam in there. It was just holding up by the 2x4s. Go to the next one. And basically, that's where we finished. So that last little section we were unable to get done, but nonetheless was a good time. A couple of things are not pictured. One, I was able to do a devotional each week, or each night rather, and I really had a wonderful time on that. Ephesians chapter 6, The Battle Rages was the title of that. We went through verses 10 through 20, and just really had a great discussion, a great time of just really, that was a special time for us, and I think everyone really enjoyed that, and so looking forward to that. In fact, the camp director actually has asked me to come back in 2024 to a retreat and present that same material to the men's retreat. So February 2024, I'm hoping there's going to be a lot of snow, and I'm also really hoping that I can just sit on that stupid deck. That's all I want to do, okay? Anyway, we'll see what happens, but that'll be in February 24, Lord willing. We'll see how all that plays out. Go to the next one. I did have plenty of wildlife. This is actually just outside of our cabin, and this is only one little shot. She was sleeping, same one. She was actually sleeping under the cabin next to us. We even stayed there while some of the guys were working. She didn't care for the side-by-side when it drove up, but she was okay while they were working. She just stayed underneath that deck. I think she thought it was hers first. Go to the next one. That's even the neighbor's dog. I had no idea who he was, but he was cute, and he just came up and just started loving all over me. Then I found out he was the neighbor's dog, but anyway, he made my day. Go to the next one. That's not just a random picture of trees and brush. Go to the next picture. Same picture, right in the middle is a moose. And so it was a cow moose that we saw. Another guy actually saw a bull moose. Right outside of our cabin was one of the mornings, a buck, a doe, and 2 fawns. And so there was quite a bit that was going on out there, and we were thankful for that. And the next one, beautiful area. This is heading up towards what they call the Red Cliffs. This is just actually on the lower edge of it. And I had walked up there one evening, but just an absolutely gorgeous view from there. Go to the next one. And this is sun setting out of there. And so beautiful area. Next picture. And the same concept with the sun setting there as well. I think that may be the last one. No, that's the last one. That was sunrise the morning we were getting ready to leave. And so that was a neat opportunity. A couple more things I did not have pictured. Chuck and John, both of those guys did insulation in the ceiling for the kitchen. It was a miserable job for those 2 guys for about a day. Nobody took any pictures of that, but it was not a very fun job. And a huge praise. Well, I guess one more. Some guys had done some work on a cabin, some of the plumbing as well. And to my knowledge, no pictures were ever taken of that. There was a huge praise that was there. The 2020 is when the sheetrock was delivered. And there was a contractor who was Christian down in Pinedale, and he donated all of the sheetrock and donated the labor to install and finish the sheetrock. And then there were a lot of things that happened with him, some illnesses. I believe his wife passed. His wife passed?
She contracted cancer about a month later, and then she died a year later.
Yeah. Then in the stress of his taking care of her, he ended up with some issues on his liver, and so he just was unable. Well, the project really inside is to the point where the sheetrock needs to go up. And there was talk of us doing some of that sheetrock as well when we got there, or when we were making the plans. And that guy who was donating the sheetrock actually hired and is paying himself a group to come and hang and finish that sheetrock. So he just felt so burdened for that, and that was something that he had committed to. And so now out of his own company's profits, he's paying this group to go up there. And so while we were there, there was a group of Mexicans that came up to do all of the work, and they showed up, I believe it was Wednesday, when they showed up. And so I think the expectation is in about 3 weeks, they should have all of that done. They had the entire upstairs hung by the time we were leaving. And so they should be probably on about a 2.5 to 3 week schedule. If we had done that, we'd be on about a 3-year schedule. And so we were thankful to not be involved in that. But just a wonderful trip. Really, the Lord was very good to us. Best weather we've had. We had no snow. We had no ice. We were in about the 70s or so in the evening or in the daytime. And then down into the 40s probably or so at night. But just really beautiful weather, great time of fellowship. But thank you for the prayers. We could not have done that without the Lord's help. And it's like, I sat there and I still keep thinking, man, I wish we could just finish that deck. And I have to keep saying, well, we exceeded actually what we were supposed to have done. And so we had a great time. We were able to get a lot accomplished with 6 guys. No one got hurt, and so we were thankful for that. Kelly, you got anything you want to add into things?
I would like to say that Pastor did a great job, and he always does. And all the guys look forward, and ladies who've been on the trip, they always look forward to the devotions. And it goes without saying, I guess, and I think most of you have a great appreciation for this. Pastor Dan never just throws something together. And so he does well as far as presenting it. He does well as far as studying for it. He's always prepared. And so that's one of the things I really appreciate about him individually, is the fact that you don't have to worry about him going in and putting a bunch of filler in his messages. You don't have to worry about him reviewing previous messages for 40%, 50%, 60% of his preaching time, and then just giving you a little 40% later. He always does a great job with that, and I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It was a good time, and we had a great time. Kelly and I still talk to each other even after working together for a week. It's probably the most we actually worked together out of any of the trips. Normally we end up on opposite ends of something, but we really kind of hung out together the whole time. So we were glad. Nothing was easy on the decking. It was warped. Pull one end, the other end pops out. And it just was a struggle the whole way. Why it was warped, I'm not sure, other than the fact I've been sitting outside for 2 years. But it just, nothing was easy. And so it'd be like, so we would have those moments, I'd pull, hey, quit. He'd pull, quit it. So then we'd end up the usual stuff. But I had a good time. We were thankful. And again, thank you for your prayers. I know that many of you prayed, many of you inquired as to how things were going. And really, honestly, it went well. We were thankful for it. And always thankful to be able to leave and say, we helped that camp. So a couple of things I think we need to pray for that camp. They are now 5 years into this project, and Dean said that when it's done, the insurance is estimating its value to be a little over $3 million on that particular building. But they have got a meeting in September that there is a group that is a Christian-based group that has helped a number of camps, including I think the Wilds was one of them. I know Ironwood is another one, which is out west. It's camps that would be similar mindset. Red Cliff would be in that as well. Well, in September, they are considering helping Red Cliff to be able to get that final push financially to be able to get everything in. And they've got, Kelly and I were talking just on the way back, the number of systems that have to go in, the heating and air system, for example. There are still some tremendous challenges. The kitchen, some of the equipment is already there. They've had some stoves, but they're praying, for example, for a dishwasher, a commercial dishwasher. $6,500 roughly is what he's saying that is. A walk-in cooler, things like that. Those are some major expenses. And so let's just pray as a church for them, that they are able to see this project come through to an end and to be able to start using that facility. They've had to adjust so many things and set up so many temporary things that they would like to be able to get up in there and be able to begin using it. They've had to install a fire suppression system. They've got 3 tanks up a little bit higher up on the property. Each tank holds 12,500 gallons. And so there is I think it's an 8-inch line that they have got run down through there. And then they have got a valve system in the building and all of that in case there is a fire. It triggers the sprinkler system and all of that. So they've got to put up a building out of the same building blocks that we used. It's an insulated concrete form, but they've got to put up another building, so to speak, around those tanks just so that it doesn't freeze. And so just so many things like that, things we're not used to in our area, but certainly is a little bit of a different thing. And so Dean Loftus is the director. He has been there for many years, is doing a phenomenal job with the camp and the direction that it's going. But let's just make it a matter of prayer as a church that they are able to see this project come to an end and be able to utilize this facility, and I hopefully see some of their numbers pick back up to what they were prior to the fire that they had. So the fire in 2017, COVID in 2020, and it's just been a challenge for them. So make this financial decision a matter of prayer if you would, and hopefully we'll be able to get some good news on that. All right? Well, thank you so much again for the help, the support, the prayers, and the willingness to say be gone, maybe the eagerness to say be gone, but we're thankful for it and just an opportunity to be able to get away. It was a good time, refreshing yet exhausting at the same point in time, and so we were thankful for it. Ryan, come lead us in the final song.
Let's stand and we'll sing 320 in the Garden.
Go ahead and be seated. I'd like you to turn to Psalm chapter 9 this evening. We'll be in a different text. I just want to share more of a simple kind of devotional type thought. Been a text that has been in my mind for a while. I did not do a handout intentionally. It was not something that I just forgot to do. Chose to not do one tonight. If you wanted to take notes, I would say have two columns. One column, the heading would say God is, and the other column would say I am. And we'll put things into a proper perspective. I think that in many cases, you and I do not have a very solid view of who God is. I think we have an entirely overly inflated view, however, of who we are. The reality is that when we come to understand who God is, we'll have a much better understanding of who we are, and then we'll have a much better understanding as to why we are here, what it is that we are to be accomplishing. So two columns, God is and I am. Let's begin Psalm chapter number 90, verse number 1. The Bible says, Lord, thou hast been our dwelling place in all generations. before the mountains were brought forth, or ever thou hadst formed the earth and the world, even from everlasting to everlasting, thou art God. Thou turnest man to destruction, and sayest, Return, ye children of men. For 1,000 years in thy sight are but as yesterday when it is past, and as a watch in the night. Thou carriest them away as with a flood. They are as a sleep. In the morning they are like grass which groweth up. In the morning it flourisheth and groweth up. In the evening it is cut down and withereth. For we are consumed by thine anger, and by thy wrath are we troubled. Thou hast set our iniquities before thee, our secret sins in the light of thy countenance. For all our days are passed away in thy wrath. We spend our years as a tale that is told. The days of our years are 80 years and 10. If by reason of strength they be 80 years, yet is their strength labor and sorrow, for it is soon cut off, and we fly away. Who knoweth the power of thine anger? Even according to thy fear, so is thy wrath. So teach us to number our days, that we may apply our hearts unto wisdom. This year we chose as our theme to walk in wisdom. I want to return somewhat to that theme tonight, even though it's a relatively brief message, and we may have some upcoming messages to return to this as well. It's important for us as believers to understand who God is so that we have a biblical perspective of who we are in relation to that. As I've already mentioned, once we derive that focus, then all of a sudden we're able to understand why we're here and what God would have for us. As I was considering what to share tonight, I was pondering, well, what is it that sticks out from our opportunity at Red Cliff? Well, one of the things that sticks out to me was hearing the director's wife, Dean's wife, Lori, say, we serve a big God. They've seen that time after time after time. They have watched God provide in absolutely amazing ways. All of the concrete in that building has been donated. And that is, I don't even know how many hundreds of yards of concrete has been poured into that facility. It is amazing, and they can go back. There's so many things that they have put even dollar figures to that says this has been donated to us by these individuals. And people who've been saved, who live halfway across the country or even further, they were saved under that ministry. They have seen God do some absolutely amazing things. So one of the things that stood out to me was who God is. Well, the other thing that stood out to me was, why did we not get the deck done? And it's like, why push? Why we tried and tried and still came up short with that. And I thought to myself, how many times do we think we just simply don't have enough time? So we take these two thoughts and we combine them. God is, number one, God is my sovereign. Notice the Bible begins with Lord. I don't know whether your Bible is all caps or not. It actually should not be. Mine is, because that's how the first one is always beginning with the Psalms. But this one is not Yahweh, or that is oftentimes all caps. This one is Adonai. It is the term that would suggest he is my master. So when we just simply acknowledge that, I would say then that God is my sovereign. You realize that God has the right to do whatever he wants to do. God does not have to ask permission. God does not have to run his plans through us to seek our approval. God does not need our insights into the timing of things. God is my sovereign. God is the one who is over everything. Now, there are those who have taken this concept and have unfortunately taken it to the extreme and have abused the concept of the sovereignty of God to such a point that some people, when they hear this concept that God is my sovereign, immediately they reject the idea because of what a handful of individuals have taken and have used and have misrepresented it. But here's the reality. God is my sovereign. That leads me to say then I am his subject. You see, God is the one who is ultimately in charge of things. I have one responsibility: to obey. That's it.
Do what God has told me to do. Now, I may want to do these things, and I may try to do these things, and I may have all of these plans to get all of this accomplished. That's not my problem. That's God's problem. But I need to be faithful doing what it is that God has instructed me to do. Same thing is true for you as a believer. So when you go through the Word of God and you read various commands and you read various pieces of instruction, understand, okay, this is who God is and this is who I am. Let's not reverse that role. Let's not determine, well, I'm going to be the one who's going to dictate my life, and I'm going to be the one who's going to give all of the direction of my life. I'm the one who's going to make these plans. I'm the one who's going to succeed. I'm the one who's going to do all of these things, because if that is your mindset as a believer, you are going to fail. You are going to fall flat on your face. It is simply a reality of things. God is my sovereign. I am his subject. Number two, God is my shelter. The Bible says, Lord, thou hast been our dwelling place in all generations. Now, the picture behind the concept of a dwelling place is a place that is going to speak of security. It's a place that a person, to use today's terminology, might say that's the place we would call home. In the midst of everything throughout this chapter that speaks of how transient every element of life is, here is one part that is not. God, you have been our dwelling place. You have been our shelter in all generations. Now, the psalm is actually attributed to Moses. There are some who try to dispute that fact. Those headings are not inspired. Those headings are how it has been traditionally viewed. There's no point in arguing those things. But I want you to think about all that we have studied with Moses, and as they wandered through the wilderness, how comforting this had to have been in spite of everything they were facing. God, you are my sovereign, but you are also my shelter. You are that place of refuge. I am therefore secure. God is my shelter. I am secure. There's no better place to be than in the hands of God. John chapter 10 describes that as a place from which no man is able to pluck us out. It's a place that speaks of absolute security that is eternal in its nature. Romans chapter 8 tells us that there is absolutely nothing that will ever enter into our life, and there is no person, including yourself, that is capable of separating you from the love of God. You as a believer are eternally secure. It's amazing when we consider life and we consider all of the unsettled nature of life and our plans and how everything can just suddenly change, to remember God is our shelter. God is our refuge. Psalms describes him as a very present help in times of trouble. Because this is who God is, then I have the opportunity to enjoy his security. I have the opportunity to relish in that, but I also have the opportunity to come and talk to the one who is my security. So when everything is not going the way that I want it to go, I need to have in my life as a first and as a natural response, the response of prayer. Here is who God is. He is my shelter. Therefore, I am secure. But I wonder how much we really relish in that security, or do we look for that security in a host of other things, as many in this world do, where we seek for it in finances or we seek for it in relationships. The reality is it's in God, and it is only in God. God is my sovereign, therefore I am his subject. God is my shelter, therefore I am secure. Number 3, God is eternal. I am transient. I'm not going to be around for long. God, on the other hand, is eternal. Notice verse 2. Before the mountains were brought forth, before creation, wherever thou hadst formed the earth and the world, even from everlasting to everlasting, Thou art God. I want you to think about the incredible statement that is made there. For us, everything has a point at which it began. We don't think of things in a light of not having a point where it began its existence. The trees that we see planted around at some point in time were planted, or they began from a seed. They had a definite point of origin, but not God. Before creation ever came into being, God has always been. How foolish we are to think that we should subject God to time. We often get frustrated when God is not acting in a timely manner as we deem time should be. Well, as the passage is going to make very clear, God doesn't operate that way. Notice verse 3. Thou turnest man to destruction. The word destruction there has the idea of being pulverized to dust. That is the picture of Genesis chapter 3, that we will return to dust. It's actually the only place where this is used. Man is going to return to dust. And sayest, return ye children of men. God, we aren't going to live here forever. Some point in time, our bodies are going to return back to dust. He continues, verse 4, for 1,000 years in thy sight are but as yesterday when it is past, and as a watch in the night. Now, this verse is not intended for us to try to do prophetic calculations off of. What is being taught here is God does not measure time as you and I measure time. He exists in a realm outside of time. 1,000 years. You know, there's been a lot that has happened in this world since the year 1022. Whether or not we have advanced or digressed might be up for debate. But you go back and think about all the things that have happened since 1022. That's nothing in comparison to God. Those 1,000 years are as a day, yesterday when it's passed. They're compared to a watch in the night which lasted for only 4 hours, very brief time. Has it dawned on you what eternity is actually like? You and I as believers have a wonderful eternal future for us. We still had a point of origin. But I want you to think about the reality of the rich man and Lazarus, for example, in Luke chapter 16. Do you realize that that man has been suffering for nearly 2,000 years? And 1,000 years are but as yesterday. Just a drop in a bucket. It really is staggering to think about. He continues, verse number 5, thou carriest them away as with a flood, mankind that is. You take it away just as a flood quickly will sweep something away. You've seen probably videos where individuals tried to do something very foolish and cross a flooded roadway. Before long, a $60,000 vehicle that is four-wheel drive is no longer touching ground and is floating on down the river. Well, it's four-wheel drive. Well, that's great when all four wheels are touching ground. Does you no good when it's floating downstream. Man, carried away as with a flood. There is a sleep. In the morning they are like grass which groweth up. In the morning it flourisheth and groweth up. In the evening it's cut down and withereth. For we are consumed by thine anger, and by thy wrath are we troubled. The psalmist is reminding us God is eternal, but we are transient. God does not measure time the way that you and I measure time. God exists in a realm outside of time. We do well to remember that you and I have a set time here on this earth. The psalmist is going to direct our attention to that in just a little bit. So God is my sovereign, I am subject. God is my shelter, I am secure. God is eternal, I am transient. Number 4, God is holy, I am sinful. Thou hast set our iniquities before thee, our secret sins in the light of thy countenance. 1 John reminds us that God is light, and in him dwelleth no darkness. Do you realize that with God there's not even a hint of darkness? He is absolutely holy. You and I often do not view sin that way. We view sin as, some have described it today, a moral failure. Such a nice positive term to put on it. We view sin as, well, it's okay, it's not that big of a deal. After all, look at all of the things that I've done. I want you to think about your actions in the light of his countenance. Think about your words in the light of his countenance, your thoughts in the light of his countenance, and I can assure you when you ponder them that way, sin looks a lot different. I've said on a number of occasions that sin is always viewed differently when it is viewed from the foot of the cross. When you see what that sin cost, you'll have a much different understanding of it. The ones who insist on their rights and the ones who insist on their own standards as the means by which decisions are made have not come to an understanding of the true nature of sin, nor have they come to an understanding of the holiness of God. Why is it that we do certain things or don't do certain things? Is it so that we can maintain a good impression in the eyes of others? Well, if that's your mindset, you're going to make some very tragic decisions. Why do we do the things that we do? Well, perhaps it's because we know that if people saw these things, then they would think differently of us. So let me just remind you, God knows every detail about you. Even those secret sins, God knows. He continues, verse number 9, for all our days are passed away in thy wrath. We spend our years as a tale that is told. So now we've established four things that God is, and the implications then that those four statements are, for me, I want you to now notice how I'm to live in light of this. The days of our years are 80 years and 10. If by reason of strength they be 80 years, yet is their strength labor and sorrow, for it is soon cut off, and we fly away. The psalmist is not saying that you are guaranteed 70 years. You may not be. Psalmist is certainly not saying you're guaranteed 80 years. Some exceed 80, some fall far short of 80. But on average, he takes these two numbers. He says, okay, so maybe you're going to be granted 70 years on this earth. Well, maybe you're going to be granted 80 years on this earth. He says those years are consumed. Their strength is labor and sorrow. It's soon cut off. We fly away. Who knoweth the power of thine anger? Good question. Who's really able to understand it and able to comprehend it? Even according to thy fear, so is thy wrath. Now here's how you and I are to respond. So teach us to number our days, that we may apply our hearts unto wisdom. Let me say it this way. The brevity of life demands a God-centered focus. The brevity of life demands a God-centered focus. As I thought back through the week, I thought, man, I wish I had about another hour to an hour and a half. But I didn't. That was in the course of 1 week for a simple project. I would hate to get to the end of my life and wish I had only had more years because of all that I had wasted. Life passes us quite quickly. It's amazing to me to consider where we are in 2022. To realize that we almost have now 4 months left in the year. It's staggering for us to consider. Time has passed very quickly. We set out, actually Kelly and I took off Friday, but met the group on Saturday to work for a week. That week passed very quickly. There was always the sense of we need to get more done. Man, I just wish we could be a little bit further, be a little bit better shape for tomorrow. We all would say, well, we can only do what we can only do. And some of us would say that, like myself, but inside thinking, man, I wish I could do more. So teach us to number our days, that we may apply our hearts unto wisdom. The brevity of life demands a God-centered focus. But I also want you to understand that the standard by which we are going to be judged is not necessarily the completion of certain projects. The standard by which we are going to be judged is faithfulness to what God has called us to do. I can look at that deck and say, my goodness, I wish we had finished that. 20 pieces. By the time we had made all the necessary cuts, probably at least an hour to have gotten that installed. But it may be someone else's lot to finish, not mine. It's all said and done. We did what we could do. We leave the results of our efforts then in God's hands. Or do we? We know we should, but do we? Our tendency is to emphasize, well, I've got to do all of these things, and let's be sure that we understand the standard by which I'm going to be judged as a steward is ultimately a standard of faithfulness. Did I accomplish what God has asked me to accomplish? Not necessarily what others have set out for me to accomplish, but did I accomplish what God set out for me to accomplish? It's amazing how we watch young people grow, how quickly it seems that they grow. For me, Rebecca is now entering her senior year of college. I struggle to wrap my head around that. I remember when she was just born, and now we're talking a senior in college. Many of you have gone through the same realities of life. God demands that we be faithful. But the brevity of life demands that we have a God-centered focus. God is my sovereign. I am his subject. God is my shelter. I am secure. God is eternal. I am transient. God is holy. I am sinful. But in his grace, God uses me. And in his grace, God chooses to allow me a part in advancing his kingdom. May we develop a focus that is God-centered, and may we be reminded that our standard by which we are ultimately going to be judged is faithfulness to what God has called us to do. Let's just stand for sake of tonight. We'll not have a closing song. I hope this has been an encouragement and a help to you. Thank you again for your prayers, the opportunity to be able to get away and minister there in Pinedale. Please keep that Red Cliff Bible Camp in your prayers. The meeting coming up in September, and I'm not sure the date. I never heard the exact date, but just be in prayer for that all of that is able to be a blessing to them. Let's close with a word of prayer. Thank you, Lord, for this day and the opportunity that we've had to be able to get together. And I ask that you would take these simple truths tonight. Lord, nothing deep, nothing exhaustive or anything like that. But I pray that you would help us to take and apply these things to our lives and truly develop a God-centered focus so that, Lord, we truly apply our hearts unto wisdom. Help us to walk wisely. Help us to be what you would have us to be. For those who are unable to be here with us today, we ask that you would heal them, bring them back to us soon. Thank you for our online ministry and the ability that we still have to be able to reach into those homes. We ask your blessing on them. Give us a great evening tonight. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. God bless, Lord willing. I'll see you on Wednesday. Have a great week.